What's up, everybody? Welcome into Shout, a Buffalo football podcast. Wednesday, December 10th. Biggest game of the season on deck here. The New England Patriots on the road. Division is on the line. Obviously, the Bills can't win the division, but the Patriots can. If they knock off the Bills this weekend, we'll have you covered plenty over the next couple of days here on Shout as we work our way towards this big road matchup. A lot to get into on today's episode. Ryan Talbot, how are you, buddy?
Hey, I'm doing great. Great to be here. A lot to talk about. Want to give some quick shout outs to our friend Kate. Kate is always, I think, the first one in the chat saying hi to us. We appreciate your support always. And then my buddy Rocco. Rocco got engaged at the end of the game on Sunday at Highmark Stadium, right there on the field. I think we were in the interview room interviewing McDermott and company while he was getting engaged. So congratulations again, Rocco.
Congratulations, Rocco. That is very cool. I saw the pictures. I saw a little bit of a write-up on WIVB.com as well, or maybe it was WGRZ. Anyway, congratulations. Very, very cool event over the weekend. Before we get into the injury update, and we have a bunch of different things that we're going to probably ping pong around to on this episode of the show. Put out a request on the Insider text line. You can become an insider at 716-52. Oh my gosh. Blanking on the number.
6727.
Yeah, you got the last four digits
528.
there. 528-6727. 716-528-6727. Text that number. You become an insider. And one of the cool things every once in a while we like to do is put it out to the insiders. What do you want to talk about? We got a bunch of different topics back today. We'll probably ping pong around. But I wanted to get your just vibes here on Wednesday, December 10th about this matchup, because I feel like the Patriots fan base, we talked about it a little bit yesterday, feels very confident. My read on the New England Patriots side of things, seeing all the media coming out from that side today, they are towing a very political line with how they talk about the game, how they talk about the Bills. I thought it was interesting. I just retweeted a quote from Drake May talking to the podium today where he said, we're still chasing the Bills, even though they're up a bunch of, games in the division. And it feels like even if the Bills win this week, there's still a very likely road that the Patriots win. What's your vibes on this game tell you here?
Yeah, and I'll add Stephon Diggs, too, being asked about it and finding out they were a home underdog and pretty much saying good, liking to fly under the radar. But from the Bills' perspective, I think they're feeling pretty good going into this game. The initial injury report came out today. Now, mind you, today it wasn't really a true practice, but it's much shorter than it's been in quite some time. So I think the vibes are up in terms of the health of this team and big picture. I know our preview show is not until Friday, but when you look at this Bills team, I feel like this is a completely different roster in terms of the way they're playing right now, especially on the back end of that defense, for instance, versus what the Patriots saw in Week 5.
I went back and watched that Week 5 game, and it's such a stark contrast to the style of play. Like the turnovers, the second half turnover was the one that really got them in the end. The first two in the first half really didn't have that big of an impact on the game. To me, the bigger storyline coming out of that game was the penalties. How undisciplined this team played at home against the Patriots team that, I think you should have been dialed up for that game. So I think you take all that into consideration. You take into consideration the fact that that was just the beginning of the Shaq Thompson experiment. He was working in on base packages next to Terrel Bernard as opposed to, playing at the middle linebacker position. And maybe now it's going to be the reverse this time around, where Terrel Bernard is kind of inching his way back to health. Maybe when they go base, Terrel Bernard is the guy that they throw out there in that package next to Shaq Thompson, who I think has to remain the starting middle linebacker, right, Ryan? Like, I don't think you can make a move going up against Travion Henderson and Ramondre Stevenson with the way that this defense is rallied around Thompson.
I feel like you can't take Thompson off the field, and I get it. You're talking about a team captain in Terrel Bernard, someone that has the respect of everyone in that room. But in terms of the actual play this season, Shaq Thompson has been the best linebacker by far on this roster. The way he played last week against Cincinnati, taking outstanding angles, making great plays, sniffing out short passes, making instant tackles there. That's the type of linebacker that the Bills have been missing this season. And now that he is back and healthy, you can't get him off the field. Terrel Bernard, like I said, he's a captain. You can ease him back in the lineup. You can get him in sub packages. But let him know, hey, this guy's playing well right now. We're going to go with the hot hand. This is going to let you continue to heal up while we use you in maybe a smaller role on the defense side of the ball.
And the other piece of this is like Shaq's struggled to stay healthy. So just getting Bernard back on the field gives you another option should Shaq get banged up again. But I just think it's about a mindset and the way, the style of defense that we've seen with Shaq Thompson out there. And, Corey asks in the comments, am I wrong for not wanting Bernard to come back yet? Thompson has been so good. No. And I would say, like, if you were asking everybody in that defensive room, I mean, they've rallied around Shaq in a way that we just didn't see in the previous 2 months of football. So I think you move forward with how this thing is going. And the other piece of this too, that could be interesting. So what I think the best way to move forward, if the Bills can get Shaq back in the mix for next season, is to potentially think about, if you're moving on from Matt Milano, or however that ends up materializing. Maybe he wants to play one more season, or he's not sure about like how much longer he wants to play, and he comes back to Buffalo on a 1-year deal, and being a part of the situation, whatever that case may be. I think the next iteration for Bernard could be a slow push into the Milano role. And I mentioned Shaq Thompson getting banged up a couple times this year. Matt Milano's been banged up just about as much as anybody on this team over the last couple of years. So you could be looking at a situation at some point over the next couple of weeks where Thompson's in the lineup, Milano goes out, and now you got to maybe work Bernard in next to Shaq Thompson. And I don't think that's as big of a deal as people might think it is at first thought, because they play a little bit more positionless in this defense than they probably have at any point in Sean McDermott's career. I mean, they talk about them being interchangeable, a lot like the safeties too, to a degree.
Yeah, I agree completely with that assessment. I think that the Bills are in a good spot right now with their ability to mix and match depending on injuries and who gets banged up. I even feel like Dorian Williams has taken a step this year in terms of his play on the field when given the opportunity. So, the constant has to be Shaq Thompson as long as he's available. It was mentioned here in the comments about how the Bills have a run defense when Shaq is on the field. We were talking about this yesterday on our show with the guys from WIVB. And over the last 3 weeks, the Bills have the number 2 run defense in the league. It's a smaller sample size, but compared to where this team has been in terms of one of, a bottom 5 unit, they're still 28th overall on the season. It's been night and day. So they're certainly turning a corner there. The importance that Shaq Thompson has meant to this team cannot be understated, but you're right. Overall position is a little bit positionless, like all those years of Poyer and Hyatt at safety. And even now, so, at safety, it's not a huge deal. I think that certainly benefits the Bills in their ability to mix and match guys.
It may not be a huge deal on the field, but off the field, Ryan, if you're looking for a deal this holiday season, Christmas bonus is underway at Tops Friendly Markets. And right now, it is time to hop aboard the Savings in Express. Christmas bonus means that you shop at Tops and save $10 at all your other favorite restaurants and stores. With over 20 gift cards to choose from, there's something for everyone on your list. And don't forget to treat yourself to some extra savings too. Great gifts like toys and games from GameStop or Toys R Us at Macy's, things for your home from Lowe's, that new big screen TV you've been wanting from Best Buy, and so much more just by shopping at Tops. Get more out of your holiday budget with Christmas bonus from Tops. All right, Ed Oliver, Ryan, everybody's kind of been following on the old Instagram here over the last couple of weeks as Ed Oliver has continued to post updates, or I think his wife might have been posting updates as well. He was doing bicep curls with the little baby. I saw him working out in the field house today. He's been much more present around the facility, doing some push-ups. I think that's the latest big update. To me, my sense is there's no way that the Bills play in this playoffs coming up without Ed Oliver. I just feel like he is on this collision course with getting back on the field. He's been a very available player over the course of his career. This is the first time where he's missed multiple extended periods. And I think that, that you felt it. And it could be a really big supercharge back to this defensive line. I do want to point out one thing, though. I think it was Monday. Sean McDermott was talking about the host of injuries. And when he got to Ed Oliver, he kind of mentioned like that they're hopeful for Ed to get back. It didn't feel like it was like, even at this point with how much he's getting ramped up, that it's like written in pen that they're expecting him to make it back. So I think that for as excited as Bills fans are for that potential return to what it can mean for them in the playoffs, I don't think it's 100% at this point, even though it feels like he's doing everything he can to get back.
No, it's no guarantee, but I'm right there with you. I would be shocked if he's not on the field for Buffalo's first, round playoff matchup, whether they're the wild card team or if they can somehow win this division. I think he is trending in a good direction. The last video is the push-ups, and I get it. You don't use the bicep a ton in push-ups, but the fact that the brace is off the arm is what's most encouraging. You're 6 weeks removed from the surgery. Generally, people are still wearing the brace at that point. And we know that athletes are a completely different animal than the common human being. So a lot of the times they're ahead of the curve. But, regardless of the position, we've seen so many athletes come back weeks earlier than their prognosis. Joe Burrow being a great example, the quarterback that the Bills saw on Sunday. He was about 3 weeks ahead of schedule in terms of where he has been at. So Ed Oliver being ahead of the typical normal human being schedule of this injury is no surprise. I certainly think, though, he is trending in the right direction, and that's going to obviously help because he is one of your top two defensive linemen on this team, him and Bosa this year, and getting him back for the playoffs, hopefully having a healthy Bosa could pay huge dividends. And real quick, a huge shout out, though, to Daquan Jones. I feel like he's playing great football as of late, really holding his own there. He's another player that I didn't know what was left in the gas tank in terms of how well he was going to play. He wasn't very good last season. I really feel like the last few weeks he has been a stabilizing force on the interior of that D-line.
We got a super chat here from Mark Bouchard. It seemed like Joe Brady opened up the passing game more on Sunday than he previously has. Do you think he saw the positives from this and will use the passing game more against the Patriots? It's a good question. Shout out to Mark, one of our regulars. I think we'll see him at a couple of live shows this month. This is a matchup where I think you want to pass the football, Ryan. I mean, this is one of the, if you go by DVOA and some of the advanced metrics, one of the more beatable passing defenses in the leagues and one of the tougher ones to run against. I think Milton Williams being out of the lineup, he's on injured reserve. It's going to affect them. And then on the other side, Will Campbell also going to affect them. But Dalton Kincaid was electric in the first matchup against the Patriots. And I think that's one of those things coming off of a game where I thought he was really good. Dawson Knox was really good. I think you get excited about what your tight ends can potentially do in this game against a team that isn't as bad as the Bengals, but when it comes to tight end defense, not amongst the elites in defending against that position.
No, and it's tough for me to sit here and say that like the passing game opened up necessarily. I think that the Bills exploited a weakness that the Bengals had. Defending tight ends. They were the worst in the league going into that matchup. The Bills took full advantage of it between Dawson Knox having a season highs in receptions and yardage and his production. Dalton Kincaid coming back, performing very well, scoring a touchdown, even Hawes scoring a touchdown. That's all encouraging. And I would love to see the tight ends stay very involved in this passing attack. What worries me, though, is the lack of consistent production from the wide receivers. And mind you, Joshua Palmer didn't play in this game. Khalil Shakir, in terms of the targets, what you want to see out of him. It's every week it's different in terms of how involved he seems to be in the game plan or looks that he gets. Coleman was kind of low on the snap count, made a play when needed, but they're still kind of all over the place, in my opinion, with their wide receiver usage. There was some encouraging signs the way Allen passed the ball, but I still need to see it again this week to make sure it wasn't just the fact that they beat a Bengals team that's extremely bad against the tight ends, and that's maybe all it was.
Some good questions here. Some people asking about Joey Bosa. That's probably where we can go next. Yeah. And the guys that are potentially returning, we already kind of covered Bernard. Spencer Brown limited today. Joey Bosa limited, and then Josh Palmer at wide receiver. Looks like Brown and Palmer, based on their comments after practice, are in line with returning this week, which I think you're excited about. The wide receiver numbers are going to be really interesting, like how they end up. Palmer being inactive the last couple of weeks has allowed the Bills to go back to Keon Coleman. It's interesting. It's interesting going back to that game against the Patriots. Like Keon Coleman, that's one of his worst games of the season. I mean, they were force feeding him the ball at times. He had the really critical fumble, giving the ball to the Patriots in their red zone. 7 targets. I think he only had 3 catches in the game. Do you think the Bills consider sitting down Keon Coleman for this matchup, bringing back Josh Palmer? I think it gives you a little bit of versatility. I don't think they want to put down Gabe Davis. I don't think that they want to put down Brandon Cooks, who's starting to get more comfortable here in this offense. How do you think, before we get to Bosa, the Bills sort things out at wide receiver?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question, because would they just add an extra wide receiver and maybe go with another player of a position and put someone else inactive at a different spot? Because if it is wide receiver, it comes down, in my opinion, to Keon Coleman and Shavers. And Shavers has been so good. No. I'm saying it, but that's not even a comparison right now, because Shavers is so good at the blocking and his involvement, and obviously playing on special teams as well. So if there is an odd man out at wide receiver, I think it would have to be Keon Coleman again. And to your point, that first game, the fumble was brutal, obviously. But man, the Bills were put behind the sticks because there were a few scenarios where they were just, like you said, force feeding him the ball. 2nd and 10, let's throw a back shoulder. Let's throw a 50-50 ball that he didn't come close to hauling in either of those scenarios. And now you're 3rd and 10. It puts the Bills in a tough situation. Like they were still figuring out what they wanted to be on offense, it felt like at that point. Because through the first 4 weeks, obviously, James Cook had a huge role and still has a huge role in this offense, but they were really a kind of a run-first team there. The passing game hadn't been figured out yet. Coleman seemed to be in line to be, one of their top 2 receivers in terms of targets on the year at that point. That's no longer the case. You look at the snap count, the usage in this last game. He's still working his way up the depth chart, so to speak. And if you do get Joshua Palmer back and you want him to play a role and be active in this game, I think Coleman would be the odd man out at wide receiver.
Yeah, and you look at the snap counts from this last game. Keon Coleman coming in at 18 snaps at 28%. Lowest. I mean, that's eye-popping to me. You bring up Shavers as maybe and that's why I had that reaction. It's like,
right,
there's almost no way that Shavers is not going to get a game day jersey with how much he's meant to all parts of it. And the other interesting thing is like the role, right? Like Josh Palmer has played the Z in this offense going back to the start of training camp and beyond. They were force feeding Keon into that X role. Well, Gabe Davis is back and he's playing in that role now. And so I think that it's going to be challenging, because I don't think you can just cough up on a game day active spot, especially if all the guys that are healthy are back this week, for a guy that's going to play less than 30% of the snaps and maybe even less with Palmer back in the mix. He made a nice play in that game against the Patriots. And honestly, when Palmer's been healthy this season, I mean, go back to the Atlanta game, he made a really good play in the Baltimore game. And I know Keon, that was his best game of the season. It's just one of those things where I trust Palmer at this stage, if he's close to 100%, just a little bit more than I do Keon.
And that's fair. And he brings a little bit more. He opens up the what the offense can do. He can be that deep threat where even if you just throw the ball downfield and it lands innocently on the turf, if you're throwing the deep ball, it makes the defense realize, okay, we have to play a certain way. We have to be aware that this is a possibility. They can't necessarily just be waiting for the quick short passes and attacking the Bills that way like the Texans were a few weeks ago. And again, different personnel, different players active and available. But I really do think he opens up this offense a lot more than potentially what Keon Coleman can do for this offense.
We're going to get so much into this matchup on the preview show on Friday. I don't want to delve too far into that. I got some thoughts on how the Bills, run game is going to come under the microscope. We'll get into that all on Friday. Next up, though, I want to shift gears. We got to hit Bosa, and then I want to shift gears to a couple of the questions that were brought in. I mean, I think Bosa is the biggest dice roll of all these guys. Could he get back for this weekend? Definitely. Like, I think he's making progress. Sean McDermott seemed open to the idea on Monday, and him being limited to start the week. Tomorrow's a big day, right? Like, he's going to be padded practice. Probably, depending on if they can clear out that snow, maybe outside. It's going to snow probably a little bit this weekend. We'll see if Sean wants to take them outside. This is going to be a toughness game, right? Like, imposing your toughness on the opposite side. And I think historically, Sean has taken it easy on his teams. And there's some older guys that you want to take it easy on, but it's also like, I think there's a message that you send when you go outside in 30 degrees to practice and get ready for the weekend. I think it's still a little bit of a 50-50 when it comes to Bosa. Hamstrings are a little bit funny, but if he, sees it or division on the line this weekend, it wouldn't surprise me if he plays.
No, and it's a must-win game for the Bills in terms of the division. So it doesn't get much bigger than that. But at the same time, you're not necessarily thinking that the big picture is winning the division. The big picture is winning the Super Bowl. And looking at the standings, seeing who looks like they're a long shot to make the playoffs, a team like the Chiefs. Ravens are still in it because that division's a mess. But you look at the teams that are currently in the playoff picture, and if you have a healthy Joey Bosa come playoff time, a healthy Ed Oliver on that D-line, and then you have the safety room that's playing significantly better. You have Harrison continue to get ramped up, Benford playing like a true number one cornerback. You suddenly have a lot, and we've already talked about Shaq Thompson, obviously, a lot too. You obviously have a lot more answers on the defense side of the ball, and then, oh, by the way, you have Josh Allen on offense. So it really helps you out in terms of the true big picture, winning a Lombardi trophy, winning the whole thing. And that's more important than this matchup. So like you said, 50-50 seems like a fair, estimation of his odds of playing in this game. But if I'm Buffalo, I'm probably still holding him out. I want to see him healthy come playoff time. I'm not rushing him back whatsoever from this. You're in a great spot to claim a wild card at the worst. You have a game against Cleveland. I know their defense is great, but you can definitely win that game. You have a game against the Jets the final week of the season, and the Eagles game that everyone kind of points to as Buffalo's toughest test yet. They're a mess right now too offensively. They're turning the ball over a lot. They're having a lot of issues. So there's no reason to believe the Bills aren't going to make the playoffs this year. And if they can get healthy and get into the playoffs, that's when they can really make a run.
Speaking of making a run, Ryan, I would make a run to Amtrak.com right now to get yourself all hooked up for all of your holiday travel. And Amtrak is chock full of gifts this time of year. Make memories this holiday season. Have you ever been to New York City during the holidays? The big tree goes up, skating in Rockefeller Center. New York City during the holidays is magical, and taking the train is part of the experience. It's a great way to take the family or a group of friends. No driving, stress-free, and relaxing. You don't sit in traffic. You sit in comfort. Amtrak has a generous luggage policy, ease of travel. You'll arrive in comfort, and there's free Wi-Fi on every trip. Head over to Amtrak.com for more details. All right, let's go here next, Ryan. So one of the insider questions asks, what did you think of Sean McDermott's reaction today to the Darius Slay question he was asked earlier? Tension between the head coach and the general manager, and what this looks like going forth for the both of them. So let's back up here. The Darius Slay question came up during today's Sean McDermott press conference. He was asked, is there any update on that situation? Sean McDermott said he had none. He wasn't going to answer any questions about Darius Slay. And Tim Graham from The Athletic followed up and said, there's an old Mike Tomlin saying is he wants passengers, not prisoners, or hostages or something like that. And wants people that want to be in the building, right? Like, don't want to force somebody to be here. So would there be a time where Sean McDermott could reach a point where he wouldn't want Slay even if he wanted to report? And he shut that down really quickly, and he didn't want to talk about it. He said that's a question for Brandon Beane, and moved off pretty quickly. And I think that there's been, a lot of people that have sensed a little bit of tension between the two. This is the latest episode in that. I don't know if I'd read too much into it personally. Like, I think if you rewind the clock and you go back to when the Ty Dunn story came out on Sean McDermott a couple years ago, and there was a lot of heat on him and people calling for his job and people really ripping through a lot of the stuff and the alleged stuff that was in that story. And obviously the famous, training camp speech that he given with the 9/11 analogy and all these kinds of things. And I thought the first person that stepped up to defend him amongst all of the players that did was Brandon. And I wonder if, like, today, I think a lot of people could probably read from that Sean McDermott was maybe sending a little shade towards Brandon Beane for that whole thing breaking down the way that it did and losing Jamarcus Ingram. The other thing is he's preparing for the biggest game of his season and the division seemingly slipping away. And I think that more so than maybe shade towards Brandon was an annoyance with that coming up, with this game coming up here in the next couple of days. That was more of my read on it. And I'm not saying that there's not, but I think it was more about that than any like under the surface tension between those two.
Right. I was going to use the word annoyance, so we're on the same page here. I think his focus is zeroed in on the Patriots, focused in on ending the year strong, getting into the playoffs, where he's right, where he says that's a question for Brandon. It is. This is Brandon Beane's job is to tinker with the roster, try to improve it by any means necessary. He took a calculated risk by claiming Darius Slay off waivers, and then Slay had every right to say, I'm not going to report. Now you put him on this kind of reserve, did not report list, and everything's just kind of in flux, and that's fine. But that's not, Sean didn't sit there and bang on the table and say, I want this 34-year-old cornerback. So he's right, but in terms of saying, I don't want this distraction, I don't want to talk about this, that's up to Brandon to talk to you guys about. It was his calculated move. Obviously has not paid off to date. That doesn't mean that Slay can't have a change of heart or maybe ultimately decide, hey, this team is playing good football. Maybe I can be a difference maker and help them in a depth role. Who knows? Stranger things have happened. But right now, he being Sean McDermott is zeroed in on this Patriots game.
Yeah, and I think that ultimately, you look at Cole Bishop gets banged up with the calf injury last game. Now it looks like he's fine and he's going to move forward. But if he were to go down and miss any kind of time, now you're sitting in a really precarious spot because there is not a lot of depth. You have a young Jordan Hancock there. Obviously, Jordan Poyer has played well. I don't know where the Bills would be without Poyer and what he's kind of given their defense over the last, 6 to 10 games since he's been kind of reinserted post Taylor Rapp, who played against the Patriots, and it was as bad as you remembered on second watch. So the Bills don't get Slay, which allows Brandon Beane to then go out and bring in Darnell Savage. And I know it hasn't gone well in Washington, and I think I mentioned this on the show before that my brother-in-law is a huge Commanders fan. So anytime, he was really high on Tim Settle when the Bills went and signed him. So I sent him a text message about Savage, and he says, have low expectations because he probably thinks that it's better. The best football is behind him. But the people said the same thing about Jordan Poyer. So I'm not necessarily saying that like getting a guy like Savage in here who's had some good tape in the NFL and who might be a better fit at this stage in this defense can't give you some positive snaps if called upon. And right now it's good. Cole Bishop, Poyer, Hancock, you continue to kind of run the way that things have ran, and it's been good, but 100% injury rate in this league, right?
Right. And you mentioned Savage lost his job in Jacksonville at the start of the year, was released by the team, I believe, like week 2 of the season. Some other guys had passed him on the depth chart. They took a little bit of a cap hit or a dead cap hit by letting him go, but they saw the writing on the wall. He was not going to start in that system. He goes to Washington. It had to be tough for him because he joins the Commanders, learning the system on the fly, probably did not put on the best tape. And then they kind of go with youth now. This is a lost season for them at this point, so they go with some younger players there. So I'm not willing to write off Darnell Savage yet, especially in the role that the Bills have for him, which is clearly a depth role. They're not asking him to come in here and say, take a month, learn the system, and then we're going to throw you into the starting lineup. They love what they have right now in Cole Bishop. They have to be thrilled with what Jordan Poyer is contributing. They have a young guy in Jordan Hancock that keeps getting some run, getting some valuable reps. At worst, you're talking a safety 4. And once he can kind of learn the ins and outs of the system, I think that he can be a valuable depth piece for this team. Sometimes in the league, you just get kind of passed over because of age, because of the roster where it's currently at. And I do still think that he's not that far removed from where he was signed to a 3-year, $21+ million deal in Jacksonville. And they rewarded him for a reason. They liked his tape well enough in what he had done earlier in his career to feel like he could be a difference maker.
Over 1,000 people watching the Staples Show right now across all platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, do us a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel as well. I thought it was interesting. I don't know if you caught this. Speaking of defensive backs, I think somebody tweeted and tagged Stephon Gilmore after the Bills walked out on Darius Slay, and he kind of like replied with a eye emoji, right? And so that to me, I mean, that's just as good as adding Darius Slay at this point, right. And you'd get a fresh veteran if he would consider coming back and playing some type of veteran depth role. The idea still is sound to me that Brandon Beane approached this with, getting veteran depth at a position where you were specifically probably ousted in the playoffs last year because you didn't have it. And I'm not saying that if you have a Darius Slay or a Stephon Gilmore that you somehow find a way to win, but it's probably giving you a better chance than rolling out Kyer Elam, which you obviously had already lost all, belief in him.
Right. And he was falling all over the field in that game. So, I mean, the lost belief was kind of well-deserved at that point, unfortunately. Stephon Gilmore is someone that I mentioned weeks ago as a player that the Bills should potentially look into. And he did a podcast before the start of the season saying that he was willing to play again this year. And they mentioned Buffalo. He said, yeah, that'd be pretty crazy to go back there. I think he kind of knew that maybe some of the fan base wouldn't be overly welcoming to him. Some of the comments he made were taken a little bit out of context with the now I get to play in front of a national audience when he joined the Patriots. But the Bills teams were bad back then. It wasn't necessarily a knock at the Bills. It was more so the Patriots being the premier team of the NFL at that point in time. But he was very complimentary of the fan base, of the organization. They gave him his start. He's been training, obviously, but training on your own or training even in a gym with your own personal trainers, it's not the same as football reps. So if the Bills were to even entertain that idea, you'd have to get him in, I would think, pretty soon. Get him up to speed, let him get some actual football practices under his belt with the team. But I would certainly be open to the idea because they wanted to improve their depth. Gilmore, in my opinion, was still putting up pretty good tape last year. He was not the player that he once was, but that's obviously the case with any aging player, but still really good at the position.
Last thing before we get out of here, I want to clarify something. I've misspoke a couple of times. I said that the Patriots play at Miami in the finale. It's actually in New England. So I've screwed that up a couple of times. Wanted to clarify that. That changes the math quite a bit, right? Tua's record in cold weather. Although he exercised some of those demons, I didn't get a look at the weather report, but I'd imagine it was under 40 in New York this past weekend, correct?
Yeah, and they even said we're not worried about the weather, we're worried about the Jets. So they were asked about that, and they came out firing. I think they're up 21-0 at one point.
Wow, yeah. So, I mean, there's a possibility. I mean, the Jets played the Patriots tight a couple weeks ago on Thursday Night Football. So I'm never going to rule out any game. But Mirage, one of our insiders, he sent along the scenarios of the divisional race here. And so I want to go through it and give him a little credit. Shout out to him and all of our insiders who are awesome. Some of the brightest fans in Bills Mafia. Ravens game doesn't matter for the division. If the Bills win out, the Patriots must beat both Miami and the Jets. If they lose either and they have the same record as the Bills will win on conference game percentage tiebreak. If the Bills win out and the Pats beat Miami and the Jets but lose to the Ravens, Pats still win because of division record tiebreak. Common opponents won't matter, as if they lose to the Ravens but beat Jets Miami, they will win on the divisional tiebreaker, so won't get to common opponents. If it's either Pats win because of division or Bills win because of conference tiebreaker, one of the Bills' losses to NFC. None of the Pats' losses are in the AFC. So honestly, like, even if the Bills win this game this weekend, the way things have kind of materialized here, it's still very likely the Patriots could win the division.
Yeah, things are set up very nicely for New England, even if they drop this game. I will say this, though, even though the Ravens game wouldn't necessarily be consequential in terms of the Bills in terms of tiebreakers, I think it would start putting the doubt in their mind if you drop back-to-back games. You drop a game to the Bills, you drop a primetime game to the Ravens. All of a sudden, the whispers about this team not being legitimate get brought up. That's a little bit louder. And now then in the back of your mind too, you really can't slip up against either of those AFC East teams. So maybe it doesn't affect New England in terms of losing division, but I think it could play a role on their psyche if they do drop back-to-back games.
What do you think? What do you want more at this point? Next week, regardless of the outcome, Bills, Patriots, if you're a Bills fan, what do you want more? The Patriots to lose against the Ravens. I know we talked about the scenarios, but that gives them another loss, whatever the case may be. Or the Patriots beating the Ravens, which would have effectively probably end their season. I think they have to win out to win their division, right?
Yeah. So it's funny. It goes back to what I talked about earlier in the show. It doesn't look like Mahomes and company are going to make the playoffs. Anything can still happen. There's still a 13% chance is the latest odds I saw for the Chiefs. But if you can keep Lamar out of the playoffs, I would be okay with the Bills being a wild card team versus maybe, and like you said, the game itself does not lend to the Bills winning the AFC East, but I guess I would rather see New England defeat Baltimore in that scenario, kind of bury them. Hope that Pittsburgh maybe takes care of business this weekend against Miami, which would help them maybe further their lead within the division. If you get Pittsburgh as the division winner, I think any of the other playoff teams in the AFC would be much happier with that scenario than having Baltimore maybe sneak in and have to deal with them, despite Lamar's woes come postseason time in meaningful games. I know he has really struggled in big moments, but I think your odds are a lot better against an aging Aaron Rodgers and that Pittsburgh Steelers team.
I think you really want Baltimore to lose this week to the Bengals, obviously. And then you really want the Dolphins. I know this is wild, but I think you want the Dolphins to kind of go on a run here and at least keep themselves in the mix to make that week 18 game something that there's real juice there for them to maybe play for something, depending on how this all materializes. The Texans have tough games left, right? The Chargers have tough games left. The Colts, I know they're bringing back Philly Rivers, and somebody asked about that. I love that, by the way. Like, if for some reason at some point we got it on our news flash that, like, Andrew Luck was coming out of retirement to kind of just do it one more time, like, I don't know, that juices me up, man. Like, I love these kind of like off the wall sports stories, but it might go absolutely terrible, and maybe they don't even end up playing him. Maybe they don't feel like he's at a level that they can trust him to throw him out there, or it's going to be better than the guy that they have in there already. But a lot of tough games here, and if the Dolphins just keep winning, are you telling me right now you don't believe the Dolphins can go on the road and beat the Pittsburgh Steelers after what we've seen over that from them
Right.
in the worst of times the last couple of weeks?
No, I agree. I mean, I know that they don't have the greatest history down the stretch of the season, but Pittsburgh is truly a hit and miss team. They laid an egg against the Bills in the second half of that game. I mean, they weren't great in the first half either, but they were leading 7-3 at halftime. And then they go and they defeat the Ravens. And I get it. Divisional games, your roster is usually built to handle some of the teams that you see within your own division. But they're just a complete mystery. And right now, Miami is on a bit of a roll. They're playing good football. Can certainly happen. And wow, a nice little super sticker here. Thank you very much.
Texans do have a couple of cream puffs the next couple of weeks, so that's true. Arizona and Las Vegas. But then at the Chargers is tough. And then who knows? Like, if the Colts get any kind of average quarterback play, whether that ends up being Phillip Rivers, maybe Anthony Richardson comes back and gives them a little bit of juice somehow. I mean, we haven't seen him in a while. I'm not holding my breath for that, obviously, but I'm not really willing to completely close the door on the Colts in a gotta have it kind of game. I still don't trust that Houston Texans offense. And that's, to me, where I think it might be hard sledding. They're going to win the next 2 weeks. They're going to be sitting there at 10 wins, but then it's going to be pressure time. Like, how do you play on the road against a Chargers team that, Justin Herbert might get destroyed in that game. We'll see how that thing transpires. But yeah, I still just don't believe in that offense. The Chiefs defense has not been great this season, and they just had CJ Stroud in just terror the other night.
And that's fair, but I will say I'm willing to slam the door on the Colts, lock it, bolt it, seal it. They're done. They're toast. It's over. Great story. Great start of the year. Really happy when Daniel Jones was playing well and led them to a nice record there. But it's over. See you next year, Indianapolis Colts.
Oh, all right, good. I'm gonna save that, clip that, bring that back for week 18, and we'll fire that up. I'm sure if we went back to the season, we could fire up about 10 or 12 of both of our little hot.
That's right.
We could just get dunked on for. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Shout the Staples Show in the books. Tomorrow, bringing on Brian Hoyer to preview Bills versus Patriots. Obviously, he's doing a lot for, I believe, NBC Boston now. He has a podcast with David Andrews. They just had Josh McDaniels on. So we'll talk a little Bills, Patriots, Drake May, Josh Allen. Stay tuned for that. We can't wait. Become an insider, 716-528-6727. Send a text message. You get a 2-week free trial. You want me to ask something specific to Brian Hoyer? Become an insider, send that along. I'll check that before we tape that episode tomorrow morning. And then we'll be back for the preview show on Friday. Final thought, Ryan Talbot.
Final thought. Week from tomorrow, we'll also be at Turning Stone. Join us as we preview the final stretch run of the Bills season. We'll have tons to talk about. New York Rec and Social Club. Can't beat it there. Join us a week from tomorrow there near Syracuse.
All right, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week. We'll see you soon.